So today we are going to talk about misconceptions of online learning. And this misconception is synchronous teaching is limited, which kind of sounds a little bit like Klingon or something. So we got to explain it a little. But the moral of the story is that Laura and I are here to bust some myths, bust some misconceptions. You can see we are very tough in doing this. And so what we are here to talk about today is the myth that you can't really do a lot when you're online on Zoom. We've been here now for 2.5 years, so we know that we certainly can lecture and we can get students to talk, but we really wanted to highlight some of the options that Zoom provides us right in the app. So we're not even going to go anywhere outside of Zoom today, but the options that Zoom provides us right in the app to do a little more with our teaching. And this semester, our whole series is based on this article, 4 Misconceptions of Online Learning. So that is where we're getting our information from. So today what we're going to talk about is the why. Why are we here? We're going to talk a little bit to make sure our Zooms are updated, because Zoom comes out with new versions very regularly, and they often have new options that you can use, but you need to make sure that your Zoom is updated in order to use them. Then we're going to spend some time on whiteboards, breakout rooms, chat, and emojis. And our objective today is using advanced Zoom tools to increase student learning. So why are we here? Really building a community and offering opportunities for interaction and engagement in Zoom classes. We all know that our students are having a tough time, or have had a tough time the last 2.5 years through COVID. And so we want to make sure that as much as we can build those connections with the students and support them. And I found this quote, which is a little bit long, but I really love because it highlights what we're doing. Research shows that when students feel that they belong to their academic community, that they matter to one another, and that they can find emotional, social, and cognitive support for one another, they are able to engage in dialogue and reflection more actively and take ownership and responsibility of their own learning. And so really what that means is when students feel welcome and when they feel part of the group, then their learning increases. They feel safe to take that risk. And this is from an article, Community Building in the Classroom. And Laura can maybe pop that link in if anyone would like to read more about that. So that is the why. And then really quickly, I just wanted to talk about how to update your Zoom. So in order to take advantage of all Zoom has to offer, you want to make sure you're using the updated version, and you want to make sure you're using the Zoom app versus using Zoom in the browser. I looked it up, and there's like a 20-page document Zoom has that are pros of using the app versus the browser. And it doesn't matter that much when you are attending a meeting. The differences are very minor. But when you're hosting a meeting, using the Zoom app is much more robust and allows you to do everything that Zoom can offer. So if you want to take a look to see if your Zoom app is updated, you just open your Zoom app on your desktop. You choose your profile picture or icon in the upper right-hand corner. And it then will open a dialog box that looks like this to the right. I can't show you my Zoom in my Zoom because Zoom doesn't let me do that. So that's why we have to have a picture. And so one of the things you want to make sure is that you are in your Dell Tech account. Dell Tech has provided professional licenses to all employees on Zoom. So if you're signed into your Dell Tech account, you get to take advantage of that. You might have made, a personal account for Zoom years ago. So if you're signed into that, you're not going to get all the benefits. So once you make sure that you're signed in correctly, then you're just going to go down here where it says check for updates. You hit that little button, and then if there are updates, it will let you know, and then you can install them. I checked mine, and there were updates available. I have not updated. So I think we're at like 5.20, 5.21 version. So it's just good to check this every once in a while, because Zoom won't update on its own. It's not like your computer that's like, we're going to restart right now and update.
If you use the web version, It will be the most up-to-date version.
Right.
But if you're using your desktop version, you do need to check for those updates.
So the 4 advanced Zoom tools we're going to talk about today are whiteboards, breakout rooms, chat, and emojis. So we will just go ahead and get started. So the first one are whiteboards. And I think a lot of our math and science instructors are familiar with using whiteboards because they use them to kind of problem solve in Zoom. But I am a firm believer that we can use them throughout all of our courses, not just math and science. And what it does is you have the versatility of, a shared document along with being able to display it right in Zoom. A lot of times we have our students go to Padlet or Google Doc or somewhere else to, whether it's brainstorm or complete an assignment, but we are not seeing that in Zoom. This allows the student and everyone else to see everything in one screen. And as I was looking at the whiteboards, one of the fun things are that there are some templates available in Zoom. So you don't always have to kind of recreate the wheel when it comes to your class. You can set up some templated Zoom whiteboards to just get you started. So to find whiteboards, we're going to go back to the Zoom app. And then at the very top navigation bar is the word whiteboards and the little icon. And so you choose there and it will show you all of these different options. You can just create a blank whiteboard or you can use one of their templates. And I think, there's something like 30 or 40 templates that they have available. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice using one of Zoom's whiteboards. So in order to do that, I have to get my Zoom tools back here. And you have to stop your share. And then you go down to the bottom of Zoom and choose whiteboards. And I have saved several to use today. So I already have them ready. So hopefully you can see a whiteboard now that says pros and cons of Zoom classes. And you should be able to write in your Zoom, click on the left-hand bar that has the different options, whether it's draw, shape, line. I like the sticky note because I'm a little bit lazy. The one that's just shaped like a square. And then you can, just put your sticky note there and give me a pro and a con or more for Zoom classes. So one pro already, we've got convenience for Zoom classes. Yes, a con is no physical contact. And it's also hard then to read kind of body language when you're in a Zoom. A pro for Zoom class, you can go when you're sick. And overcoming geographic boundaries. Yes, I did my whole master's in ed tech at University of Delaware without ever once stepping on the campus. I was able to just Zoom from my house instead of driving all the way to Newark. A con is miss the casual conversations before class, certainly. And I find I try to kind of chat with my students before class starts on Zoom, but somehow it's very awkward. It's not as good as when you're in person. Another con of Zoom class is definitely internet and computer issues. A pro is no physical contact, certainly, because nobody's going to get the other person sick. That's always good. And so I think, we can use whiteboards for kind of two different purposes. And we talked about this last week, kind of the idea of community building versus content tasks. So a community building exercise might be this kind of whiteboard if you were in your, history or science or English class, where you're just kind of trying to get students to open up and talk with one another and communicate. So you might say, hey, what do you guys like about Zoom classes and what do you don't like about Zoom classes? And then we certainly could have it content-based. So maybe if we're in our history class, we could talk about, the kind of pros and cons of Reconstruction, how Reconstruction worked in the US. who benefit, or maybe even, benefiters and people that did not benefit. So that I think is great. We yes, I know, definitely history. We can use these to build that community, but then we can also use them to really focus on that content. And I think that can be really helpful for students. And it's a way to get that participation and discussion that you might not get in class. We didn't have the option of doing this, prior to COVID. Certainly we could do it on the board and have people call out answers, but there are some students that just aren't comfortable with that, but they are comfortable with typing an answer into a screen. And so that there really is that flexibility there of allowing students to participate in different ways. And I know for myself, when I'm teaching, sometimes I get frustrated because I want to hear students talk. But that's not the only way that they can participate. None of you talked except for me, but here we had this, kind of great participation, in our first exercise.
And Carrie Ann, the thing that is also, I think, really nice about this is right now, if we were to close out of this, what would happen is that the collaborators in this meeting, they would lose access to this whiteboard. However, up at the share button
Right
on
here.
Carrie Ann's, because she's the owner of it, she can give everyone access after this meeting to continue to either review these notes or to continue to brainstorm together.
Right. Yeah, and I think that can be really valuable. You can use it as a way for students to take group notes. And it helps not only that community building and collaboration, but also then you can see if somebody's kind of going off in the wrong direction and kind of hopefully bring them back. Any questions about whiteboards?
And I can export a picture of this whiteboard if I need to save it for later for study purposes, depending upon what this whiteboard was about.
Okay, so now you got to close out your whiteboard and then reshare your screen to get to our next activity.
And your controls are not visible, so don't worry about that.
Okay. So if we're thinking about our classes, oh, sorry, I'm stealing, this is Laura's line. Laura, this is your line.
That's okay. So let's just think for a minute and respond. You can unmute or respond in the chat. How could your students use whiteboards? How could you use this idea with your students? There are some ideas if you need some inspiration, but maybe you have a thought just off the top of your head that you think you could use this. We've got brainstorming in the chat. Absolutely. Some of those shared ideas, giving kudos. That's nice too. Helping to make sure that we're recognizing the hard work that people are doing in the course or that group work. Our previous lunch and learns were about group work to help people recognize the strengths within their group. And David said group work on which we have perspectives to apply to situations, timelines for concepts, sharing notes on a video. Oh, I like how you're bringing in that multimedia.
And I personally love a timeline in history. I feel like we don't use them enough because, students, that is a really, it's a really helpful visual. And I feel like, in history, we kind of just give students dates, again and again, but we don't locate them in space. And I think that can be really helpful, especially for students that think a little bit differently. So next up, we're going to talk about breakout rooms. And we want to just think about, I think we're all familiar with the concept and how to use them, but we want to think about how to be as effective as possible. So one, thinking about if you were in a physical classroom and you put your students into a group of 4 to work on problems or discussions, how do you facilitate discussion and encourage participation? What do you do as the teacher? And the answer is not that we go get a.
I think we had a little bit of freezing. What Carrie Ann was saying was that the answer isn't that the instructor goes and gets a cup of coffee, says, okay, think amongst yourselves, bye, see you later. that there's more interaction or more involvement with that instructor as facilitator. Go ahead, take it away, Carrie Ann.
Yes. So, you walk around
Oh, goodness.
what everyone's doing, so that you are on, you want them.
Carrie Ann, you're freezing quite a bit. Do you want to try turning off your video to see if maybe we can hear you a little better?
Okay, I will try to do that. Sorry, guys. And then there is a new feature in Zoom where you can broadcast your voice to all the breakout rooms. So we always had the option of sending a message to the breakout rooms, but like a typed message. But now you can kind of like a voice from God, projecting and letting people know, if there's 5 minutes left, or make sure to answer question number 3. But all those things are good ideas to remember when you're sending your students to a breakout room.
You made me think about this because I had seen how David had put it into the chat. He uses Google Docs outside of Zoom for his students to work on. When you're broadcasting that voice, if you're watching their Google Docs progress, you could say, hey, group 2, you need to get to work, or
Right.
Nice work, group 4. I see that you're really developing some good ideas. It could go either way.
Exactly. So we have been in Zoom long enough that now, but the basics of the research are that the instructor provides structure, a group leader is named, and that's important because students tend to, when they get in groups, in breakout rooms, tend to be a little bit afraid to share or be the first one to talk. So this allows for there to be an assigned group leader who's going to take control. Tasks are collaborative, so you don't just send students in to, just do individual work, that really they need to use each other, and that resources are readily and easily accessible. So you make sure, if it's like a Google Doc or, something that's shared, and so that they can all see it and use it. Oh, and they, so he said, I usually let them choose someone for a leader, and that's great too. That's totally an option. You know your class. Some classes will choose a leader, others you might have to say, okay, today, this group's going to be leaders, and the next time someone else. So we were going to practice with breakout rooms, but I feel like with our technology issues, it might be trying to take us a road too far here. But the idea was we're going to divide into groups, assign a leader, and then provide each group with 5 minutes to come up with 3 tips for teaching online courses. So rather than doing it in groups, since we have a small cohort here, we can just do it all together. So I'm going to stop my share so I can share the whiteboard, and I'm going to ask that Laura be our leader, because I know she has some good internet going right now. So I'm going to come up to our whiteboard. And so again, this is another template that I used from Zoom's whiteboard templates. And I had divided into 4 groups, but we can just all, stay in group 1. So Laura, if you could lead us, please.
Certainly. So what we want to just think about is, what are your tips for teaching online? What are some tips that you have that you've developed over the course of the last couple of years that you have found really successful for teaching online? And it can be about Zoom or online in general. So I can see who's doing that, because I see using the chat to build community in the first few sessions. It's nice because we're giving a little gold star for that one too, because we're going to talk about using the chat in Zoom next. Excellent. And being able to start with some of those easier tasks to begin with, especially if you do have students who are learning the technology. I think we've had conversations about this before, that sometimes we assume that students, when they're coming to college, that they've already had experience with Google Docs, or they've already had experience with Zoom, they've already had experience with everything. But we have to recognize, especially at the community college, that we have a large variety of students who have had such different experiences, that it might be nice to begin at the beginning, or at least to survey our students. What's your ability level here, so that we know where we might need to begin? I like that too. We have ask students to turn on their cameras if they can. And that's one of the things I like, though, that it says ask students if they can, because it's recognizing that maybe there's reasons that they're not turning on their camera, real legitimate reasons, that they're still actively involved in the course, actively involved in the session, but they just might not be able to show us their faces at that time. So that's a nice thing. And when we go back to using that chat, those are ways that people can respond, or this whiteboard are ways that we can ensure that our students are being active in the session, even though we might not be able to see them. Excellent. Great
Okay.
ideas.
So thinking about your own classes, how could you use breakout rooms to encourage participation and learning? And here are some ideas for different types of tasks you could do. So we got mind maps on Google Doc, very cool. And I think actually taking it, asking students to create a timeline of, a certain period. And it doesn't have to even be for history. It could be for scientific discovery or, development in psychology and how we, what we know about learning or what we know about behavior. Another one, short group quizzes. Oh, I like that. I was actually reading in one of the articles I was reading for this presentation, they talked about using group quizzes with students. And then different ways you can grade them and how you can, make different things count. But I think that can be really helpful. And you can have that opportunity for students to explain concepts to each other. Sometimes as instructors, we get kind of stuck where we can only explain something in one way. So students are able to then, give an alternate explanation, which can be really helpful. Practice a short presentation for feedback. I like that, April. And that's a little less pressure than practicing in front of the whole class, if you only have to practice in front of, 2 or 3 people in your group. Retrieval practice first thing each class.
David, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. I have a Google form that I give them the link to the very first thing, and it asks for 3 things from the last class you thought were important, 2 things that you're interested in or more curious about, and then 1 thing you saw in the real world this past week that reminded you of a psychology concept.
Oh, I love that. I think that's and it, that gets into like the metacognition and having our students think about their learning, which is super important because then they are able to really take charge of their learning once they start thinking about it. Okay, so chat, just like instructors, right? Especially when we have our college-wide PD days, we see this a lot. Instructors sometimes are more comfortable putting their ideas in chat rather than unmuting. And the bigger the group, the more that, I think that happens. And, I said earlier, sometimes I would get frustrated by this in my own classes, but we can use it to our advantage. This is, an opportunity, whether it's a big meeting or a classroom, where the people who aren't the extroverts like myself and don't always want to talk, still get that opportunity to participate by engaging in the chat. And they wouldn't have had that before we had Zoom. So how in your classes have you used chat effectively? Okay, I like the honesty, not very well, mostly for giving links out. And sometimes you do have to kind of beg. I have gotten to that point. Please, students, please tell me something. So, I started with, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Just share with me in the chat to kind of get us going. And then I'm scolding them because they're not eating breakfast, but, or, in our history class, I asked them what year they were born, not because I wanted to feel old, but because it was an opportunity to see, the things that I remember and I can relate to. Someone who was born in 2000 or 2005 would not remember that event. And so it's important to kind of get that idea of where our students are in kind of this time and place. Oh, ask students how old they were when they got a cell phone. I like that. So let's practice using the chat by talking about, why do you come to PD sessions? What about the sessions makes you want to attend?
And this might be a good place to explore using those emojis also. Oh, no, we didn't get to that yet. Never mind.
Yes.
I jumped the gun.
And Laura, I stole your thing again.
Gold star. We have a lot of learning new things. They like to come to PD sessions to be a sponge and learn new things.
Yes.
And to support colleagues.
Yeah.
So that's very nice.
So some ideas for chat prompts, because Laura and I were just talking before the session, how certainly people have a lot to say in 2022. If you look on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, there's a lot going on. So it's not that our students necessarily don't have a lot to say, but maybe we aren't asking them the right questions or getting kind of the right preparation. So thinking about, maybe create a question of the day, ask them what the most interesting part of the reading was, do exit tickets, and those can come directly to you, so they don't have to share out with the whole class. Solicit questions about confusing content. And again, that can come just to you. That doesn't have to come to the whole class. But giving students another chance to think about their learning and to, kind of examine where they are in the course. And, it's wonderful when you have that one student that brings up a question and then the other students realize that they have the same question too. And I like,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like this idea of using question of the day, like as a word cloud. So, and you could do it with community building. So you could say, how is everyone feeling? It's now week 7 of the semester. We're almost halfway there. Or you can, do it with a content area and talk about, what might students think about when they think about evolution or something like that.
And one point to make about sending a direct message to the instructor is to also not assume that everyone knows that they can change in the chat where it says everyone, so that you can choose, because there is a way when you're hosting these meetings that you can turn that off. So if they've been in meetings where that has not been an option, you might have to teach your students that they're allowed to send those direct messages. So just to remember, and it only takes a minute to say, hey, does everyone know? Or in case you don't know, here's how you change that. And it only takes 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah. Well, and my students seem to learn it because they ask questions like, can I go take my dog out? Which
that's definitely better in a DM.
Yeah, maybe just take the dog out. Don't bother asking me, I don't know what to say to that. So our last category here are emojis. And emojis are, images that represent emotions. And in Zoom, we have a ton of emojis available, just like on your cell phone. I use some of them here to show the range of emotions through a workday. So we can use those in Zoom as well. And so go ahead, Laura, this is your slide. I'm going to let you do it.
So we're going to go ahead. We'll practice using those emojis. So how do you feel about students using emojis in class? Why? Answer this in the chat using an emoji about how do you feel about students using an emoji.
It's a little meta, but And so to get to your emojis, you just are in that message and then you see the little happy face and you can click on that. Oh, we got Mr. Riley only responded to me, but it's upside down happy face. I think I have.
And at the bottom of the screen, when you're a host, you can choose if there's only traditional emojis that are available,
Oh.
or if you allow the entire gamut of emojis. So you decide what works best for your course and for your students, but that you have that ability here.
Oh, I didn't know that, Laura.
It's very exciting.
Yes. I like Carrie's. I don't know what it means, but I like it. Okay. It's the abacus. So she's used to teach math, so I guess that kind of makes sense. April, she's happy about it. I think she thinks it's community building, and they can give, people can give reactions, like if they understand or don't understand. And again, that can go only to the instructor. So you can explain how to use the Pythagorean theorem and then say, tell me in the chat if you understand. Oh, I like that, April. I love emojis because the students can express themselves.
She translated it for us.
Yes, there you go. And it feels a little bit lighter, and and it feels more like their regular life where they are using emojis, in the everyday world. And sometimes, they're going to use emojis and you're going to have to ask them what that means, because we're not always up on, all the lingo and what the kids are doing these days. Okay.
Well, and I was in a meeting where they asked people, and not everyone had their camera on, but they were asking them, so who has seen this before? So I saw people turn their camera on just so they could give a thumbs up. So it would be nice. This is one way that you could do kind of that check-in with your students. All right, so how do you feel about that? Thumbs up, thumbs down, and then they could give a little feeling, so if you need to continue to talk about the topic or if it's okay to move on. There's little reactions that they can provide from the choices below that help how your class is accepting or learning the information that you're providing as well.
So in your Zoom class, can you imagine how you might use emojis to get students to communicate?
And we have some ideas on the screen if you need some inspiration.
Yeah. I think, especially I like the idea of checking in with students' well-being. When you are on Zoom, you don't get to have that body language. So you can't always tell if a student is stressed or upset or something's going on. And I appreciate the honesty. So I think, just asking students, how are they doing today? Asking them how they felt about an assignment or reading. Did they get anything out of it, or were they confused, angry? And then also if you're brave, you can ask that students give you feedback during class. I think is it Instagram where you can send, like, people are like live and they can like give hearts and angry faces and stuff, like I think that's it, as you're talking, which, certainly could be brave if you choose to do that, but it would help you kind of see where your students are at, again, because you can't see their body language. So these are kind of my, takeaways from this, going all the way back to the beginning. Building community is really, really important for students, because if they don't feel safe, they're not going to learn. Zoom is here to stay, and here's my emoji to that. I don't really know how I feel about it. But it is possible to build community over Zoom. And I will tell you, I had a class last fall. I got to teach political science, which was amazing. And then, so that was, like September, December. And then last month I was at Michael's, the craft store, and I heard someone yell out, "Miss Sparks." And I turned around and it was one of my students from the Zoom class. We had never met in real life, but because we had that community in our class, she, felt comfortable enough to yell at me from across the store, and talk to me a little bit about how her life is going and how her classes are going. So it made me feel so much better that I did connect with her, even though it was only through Zoom, not in person. And then knowing that these tools are here and we can use them as a way to boost student interaction. And if we think about it a little bit and do a little planning, it can be really effective. And sometimes we just do it out of sheer desperation for getting some sort of participation in the class. Do you guys have any thoughts or questions or ideas? I know I've covered it all and now we are just good, right? I always tell my students that I keep telling jokes until I see, I see laughs. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, that is it for Lunch and Learn then. We do have some other, we have some resources here. And that's it. If you, if you need anything, we are here. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you.
Thank you so much for coming to
Yes.
Lunch and Learn today.
I'm waving, but you can't see me, but I am waving.
Turn your camera back on for a minute. It's okay if you freeze.
Still here. I didn't go get coffee or anything.